It's always nice to see actual faces or names even of people we recognize. And also thank you to our speaker, Amy Stern. Amy Stern is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in adults and geriatric with grief and loss, including the loss of physical function and independence. She practices cognitive behavioral therapy to improve behavior and thought patterns, mindfulness, and other scientifically validated psychotherapy techniques to enhance mental health, and you'll see some of them today. And she has also been part of the TGCT community for a few years now. And so I will turn it to Amy. I will share my screen.
Great. Thank you, Sid, very much. I am pleased to be here again. This is the second installment of this series related to chronic illness. And tonight we're going to highlight complementary practices for managing chronic pain. Since I'm coming from a clinical social work background, I'm going to stick to the non-pharmaceutical approaches to managing pain. So I'd like to start with the definition, of course, which is pain on most or every day in the last 3+ months, according to the National Institute of Health. And again, according to that institution, over 20% of US adults have chronic pain, and over 7 have what they call high impact chronic pain, meaning it's limiting work or life activities, again, for those 3+ months. So first off, I want to remind folks to do what they already know to do to care for themselves. And that is physically, emotionally, psychologically, socially, spiritually, since illness, as we discussed last time, impacts all those realms. I feel confident that all of you know of methods already that help to care for yourself in those realms. And just reminding yourself of those methods and implementing them is certainly important. Stopping what's bad for you is also important. There is no good research associated with the effects of smoking, and certainly alcohol use for pain relief is putting you at risk for health consequences. So I found a Healthline article about boosting chronic pain relief with natural endorphins, which I liked very much. You can see the lengthy list of suggestions that are included. I'm not going to highlight all of them. What I would like to do is highlight the ones that the National Institute of Health has research evidence about. Acupuncture, according to the NIH, there is rather research evidence that it could reduce the need for opioids. So that is certainly a complementary practice that is worth investigating. Massage, acupuncture, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and relaxation techniques and mindfulness meditation are also techniques that have evidence indicating that they may be of benefit for chronic pain. And interestingly, music is known to reduce self-reported pain and depression. I am mentioning resiliency skills and specifically this trauma resiliency model because I think it is interesting, and I think it incorporates a lot of what we're learning about brain science. And in essence, the model states that our nervous system is impacted or triggered by stressful events, of course, pain and many other experiences. And as a result of being triggered, the body's fight or flight response is activated, meaning that the body's various systems are readying for fighting or fleeing in response to a perceived threat. The model also talks about the fact that one can experience sustained stress, and therefore the impact on one's nervous system continues and can result ultimately in feelings of numbness, depression, and tiredness when your nervous system has been elevated for too long. And so this model introduces a variety of practices that can be used to reset your nervous system when triggered in order to reset it back to more optimal functioning. And the skills rather that are introduced include grounding, resourcing, gesturing, and tracking inner sensations. And I'm going to highlight grounding specifically because it's a group of techniques that are used for self-soothing to interrupt the body's response to stress and to feel safe. And they all are about bringing one's attention to the present moment. Essentially, there are 3 different categories of grounding practices. And I do really want to encourage you to check out the article from Healthline that is highlighted because it does a great job of listing the various grounding techniques. The first category would be physical grounding techniques. So we've got Sid's lovely illustration as an example of the physical grounding technique called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, in which we engage our senses by identifying 5 things that we can hear, 4 things that we can feel, 4 things that we can touch, 3 things that we can heal, 2 things that we can smell, and 1 thing that we can taste. So essentially, we are bringing our attention to the present moment via all of our senses. So that's an example of a physical grounding technique. An example of a mental grounding technique would be something like recalling an activity that you commonly do and do well, step by step, as if you were instructing someone else on how to do that activity. So let's say running a load of laundry. Mentally recalling each and every step in a detailed way brings your attention back to the present moment and away from the stress-inducing event, in this case, pain or related experiences. So physical grounding, mental grounding. The last category of grounding skills is soothing and bringing care to oneself via things like touch. Intuitively, a lot of us touch hand to heart when we're moved by something. Also, that touch puts us in touch with pressure and warmth. So soothing through touch is an option. Soothing through gentle vocalizations is another thing that is thought to trigger compassion and soothing. And what I mean by gentle vocalizations are things like, "Oh, Amy, I know this is hard, but things really are going to get easier." That would be an example of soothing through gentle vocalization. So grounding is just a category of skills that you will hear rather often in counseling and in stress reduction discussions. Guided relaxation in its various forms helps you reduce tension in the body and helps you focus in places where you feel calm and peaceful. And I often refer people to an app it's a free app that was developed through the VA, actually, called CBTI Coach. It stands for Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia coach. It's got a lot of good sleep hygiene information, but the reason I refer people to it is that under the tools button in this app, there are various 3 to 10 minute guided relaxation practices that are available at the touch of a button. And they really represent the typical array of guided relaxation practices that many counselors and others talk about. And these would include things like breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, which is no more than contracting and releasing various major muscle groups in order to sense the relaxation that comes from that. Observing sensations, inner sensations, such as through body scan practice, guided visualizations, which ask you to follow along or imagine in much detail peaceful settings. For example, many people enjoy the beach. So there's a guided visualization that's focused on being at the beach or in a forest or on a country road in this particular app. Another category of practices that's very important, and we'll illustrate why a little later, but it's essentially observing thoughts and practicing letting them go. So these various guided relaxation practices are all located within this free app and really do, as I said, represent the typical array of relaxation practices that are shared. We've mentioned breathing as one of the guided practices. There are certainly many apps that, and gosh, online videos and articles that highlight breathing practices. Clearly, breathing's always available to us. And breathing helps to decrease nervous system activity that's aroused when the body is stressed. And so it quiets the fight or flight body responses and helps to regulate the relaxation response. And there are an awful lot of breathing practices, and they can get pretty involved. And I like to keep things as simple as possible. And I think one of the big take-home messages about breathing in general is that emphasizing our exhalation, our out breath, is actually what quiets that fight or flight response to stress. And so taking a natural breath in and trying to breathe out through pursed lips approximately twice as long as your inhalation, repeated as many times as is helpful, can often calm the body. There are additional breathing exercises that I've mentioned. One is called box or square breathing. And interestingly, I was reminded that Navy SEALs use this to manage stressful situations. And it's no more than exhaling your breath completely, and then inhaling to a count of 4, holding to a count of 4, exhaling to a count of 4, holding to a count of 4, and repeating that. So there are any number of breathing exercises that you can readily find online. But again, the idea is to quiet your body's response to stress. I couldn't help but include gratitude practices again. I'm a self-compassion junkie, and the reality is that we are hardwired to focus on threats in order to ensure our survival. And so we tend to notice the negative most readily, what we call the negativity bias. but you can practice gratitude in a variety of research-backed ways, which will allow to strengthen neural pathways and rewire our brains to create more grateful outlooks. So the simple phrase that I've often heard to embody that idea is that what we pay attention to grows. We literally can change our neural pathways by practicing gratitude to increase the likelihood that we will see the positives in addition to the threatening or the negatives. And gratitude practice is associated with decrease of pain, stress, improved quality of life, etc. So I had to mention gratitude practices to round out one's experience and see the positives as well as the challenges such as pain. Mindfulness is a big topic. I was experiencing some stress when I was trying to sort of consolidate things as it relates to mindfulness and meditation. Forgive me, I'm actually pulling up a slide that I kind of altered a little bit from the one you see, but essentially mindfulness is being aware of one's present moment experience without judgment. And that sounds very succinct and easy, and of course it is not. We often have thoughts and feelings that essentially say we shouldn't think or feel certain things. And when we do that to ourselves, saying that we shouldn't have whatever emotional or cognitive experience that we're having, it creates resistance. And that resistance, as I had highlighted in our last session, causes unnecessary suffering because it adds to what's already there by essentially blocking you from being with what is your experience. Again, according to the NIH, mindfulness-based interventions are helpful in decreasing pain intensity and improving physical functioning. And there are formal and informal mindfulness practices. The informal practices tend to focus on mindful awareness of everyday activities. So, for example, practicing an ordinary activity mindfully. And I've included having coffee or tea, choosing to focus on one sensory experience associated with having that coffee or tea, such as taste, savoring the taste as fully as possible, and as your mind inevitably wanders, gently returning your attention back to the taste of that tea or coffee. And simply bringing friendly, gentle awareness to this activity until it feels completed is an example of an informal mindfulness practice. I have to mention mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's one of the first mindfulness-based interventions that was developed back in the 70s, specifically for those with chronic pain, developed by a psychologist named Jon Kabat-Zinn. And it is a blend of both informal and formal practices of meditation, body awareness, and mindful movement. And the movement is very, very gentle. Some of the take-home messages about mindfulness-based stress reduction are that, according to very recent research reviewed, regardless of the quality of, regardless of pain type, mindfulness-based stress reduction has been shown to improve health-related quality of life. What is emphasized about mindfulness-based stress reduction is that daily practice is what yields benefits. So it may not always be enjoyable, It's not meant to be terribly effortful, but it's the frequency of the practice versus the amount of time that you engage in the practice that yields the benefits. And I mentioned this class at our last gathering. PalouseMindfulness.com is the only MBSR class given by a certified instructor that I've found that's absolutely free of charge. There are certainly lots of in-person classes, but the format is 8 weeks, approximately 2.5 hours per session. Essentially, it's experiential. It introduces a variety of practices in order for you to determine what works for you. But obviously, an 8-week format is impossible for some because of time or finances. And so this online class feels like a jewel to have identified. So I highly recommend you checking it out. There are many forms of meditation. It's really an umbrella term, and it includes things like guided visualizations that were mentioned before. It may include things like focusing your attention on a particular word that might induce a state of calm or peace, or called a mantra. It might include focus on particular phrases, such as loving kindness phrases that you give to yourself and possibly extend to others. All forms of meditation include a focus on focused attention, relaxed breathing, a comfortable position, and letting thoughts and emotions pass without judgment. So there are formal practices of meditation, and I think the one that people most readily jump to in their minds when that word is used is sitting mindfulness meditation. And I'll get to that in a moment, but there's also mindful movement. So the Tai Chi, yoga, and Qigong that was mentioned at first as being complementary practices that are thought to benefit chronic pain are included in mindful movement. Body scan, or focusing on internal body sensations, is another type of formal meditation practice. And I want to assure everyone that unlike what people commonly think, you do not have to be without thoughts in order to meditate. It is assumed that our minds will remain active. What happens in meditation, and particularly in mindfulness meditation, is that we learn to see our thinking and emotional patterns and not act them out automatically, as we often do. Rather, we see them, but allow them to pass without judgment. And we do this by focusing attention on particular anchors of attention, whether that be breathing, a particular phrase, a particular image. So as we are sitting, learning to acknowledge the thoughts and emotions that are arising, we notice them, but allow them to pass rather than identify with them and follow them out. And we do that by noting them and bringing our attention back to our breathing, or that mantra or phrase that is calming, or those phrases, or a calming image. So in essence, in sitting mindfulness meditation, we're changing our relationship to our thinking, not trying to remove it altogether or somehow magically make it not happen. We are hardwired to think, and so we will think. But we want to change our relationship to thinking to allow us to consider what we actually need now, rather than what often comes up, which are the reactive, sort of habitual responses. So meditation truly is about redirecting our attention to our senses and to thoughts that serve us beneficially. There are a host of meditation practices, and I can't begin to scratch the surface in the time that we have together. But some of them include naming our emotions. Simply the act of naming our emotions serves to contain them in some sense, and therefore not have us be as reactive to them. We can ask ourselves if our emotions are accurate or if they're overwhelming. We can ask ourselves if we are resisting negative emotional responses to stressors such as pain, or whether we are allowing ourselves to identify where in our body we might be experiencing tension or other emotion, and softening in that body field and allowing our experiences. I mentioned loving kindness meditation, and it's one of the first that I was introduced to and really has been personally quite helpful. It can be an extensive practice, but it always begins by wishing yourself certain states. So even the traditional phrases include, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be peaceful, and may I live with ease. And they're stated in that may I format because even if we don't currently feel that we are embodying those states, we can wish ourselves those states. So loving kindness practice is really lovely, and potentially very according to recent research, and I hate that I've lost the citation, I will find it. It is within one of the last few issues of Mindful magazine. But this recent research indicates that meditating for as little as 12 minutes, 5 days a week, can strengthen our ability to get to know and manage our pain. So again, it's not amount of time as much as frequency of practice that yields benefits. And there are numerous fantastic meditation apps out there. I personally use 10% Happier. It was developed by a guy who really was a skeptic about meditation, and learned to appreciate its value in addressing anxiety and other states. Insight Timer is a free meditation app that has all the biggies in the field of meditation practice, whether there are single topics or extended classes. Headspace is another app that even some health professionals can get free of charge through their insurance companies. So that's only a bit about meditation, since it is a truly extensive topic. But again, according to the NIH, cognitive behavioral therapy is particularly helpful in decreasing pain intensity and improving physical functioning. And in essence, the practice is about recognizing that what you think affects how you feel and how you act. That is truly the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it is, in fact, the most research-backed therapy approach. You should consider exploring cognitive behavioral therapy when you're experiencing symptoms that are interfering with important areas of your life, such as relationships or work, and are regularly distressing. Ways to access cognitive behavioral therapy. Obviously, if you have insurance, one has worked to to have that, and so you should access that if you wish. Just simply clarify with your company in-network and out-of-network benefits for outpatient counseling. And then you can try to identify therapists that specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy. There are therapist finders, probably most notably and reliably is Psychology Today. It allows you to look up therapists according to therapeutic approach, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, such as insurance taken, location, etc. The National Association for Cognitive Behavioral Therapists is another way that you can find certified CBT therapists. So there are also some pain apps, and it's a little bit of the Wild West out there in that there's not a lot of research supporting a lot of them. I did find a review of these various apps dated 2019 that identified 3 as meeting the largest number of items to support pain management. And that includes Curable, Super Better, and Pain Scale Diary and Coach. Again, there's not a lot of solid research backing these, though Curable seems to have more than many. It states in its literature online that in a non-peer-reviewed study, there was evidence demonstrating physical pain relief, decreased anxiety, and improved quality of life. And there's no question that this and many pain apps pull from cognitive behavioral principles and are certainly helpful in that regard. So I think I have come to the end of what I had prepared. I hope I have not rambled too quickly, but I will leave it at that and gladly entertain questions or discussion.
So we will stop sharing. And so since we have a reasonably sized group, I'm going to let people come off mic if they'd like, or to put their video on and ask Amy directly. Let me give yourself the option for that right now. You should be able to do it. And while you guys figure that out, there is a mic button to the left. You should be able to. You can send a comment in the chat that will go to me if you cannot, and I can try and troubleshoot. But to start, while people are figuring out and coming up with their questions, I wanted to ask you, of all of those approaches, mindfulness, meditation, what do you think works best for you?
Well, I'm not living with chronic pain, so I feel like I'm not necessarily going to do justice to that answer. I think you need to find the practices that feel like they truly resonate for you, because those are the ones that you are going to engage in on a regular basis. And that's truly the bottom line. I mean, there's, to be a little more personal, I use 10% Happier. I find it engaging, easy to use. It certainly represents, I think, the leading practitioners. But truly, the idea is to find the practices that resonate for you so that you will use them regularly.
Thank you for that. I didn't know if someone else was popping in. Sorry, it's hard for me to see the side of the chat at the same time. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask as well?
Do you have any experience or data with, I guess this is a two-part question, but with either THC or CBD in relation to chronic pain?
You know, I kind of stayed away from that because it's while those are complementary, I'm not as up on the data related to that as I certainly could be. And I think there's so many other approaches that have more of an evidence base that people can use. It's not to say that you shouldn't consider those things in consultation with providers, but I just think that there are other things that you can try that have reliable results.
We like those things. And also it's worth noting that Amy also sees probably substance abuse. And so her image and views may be also reflective of watching people have a hard time as well.
Yeah, yeah, that is true.
But I love the question, Gary. Thank you.
Forgive me for crunching up next to the camera. I'm having a hard time with the volume, so that's why I look very strange.
So we also got a question of whether you should use these methods during pain or before pain, so to be reactive or proactive, and if they are helpful during the actual pain, and which ones maybe are helpful acutely.
I think the grounding and the eye chill skills are meant to calm your system as quickly as possible. It doesn't mean that it's going to immediately do away with pain, but it's for when our nervous systems do get triggered. A lot of the other practices are things that you can engage in regularly in order to get benefit. And you know, none of them, because they're all complementary, none of them are gonna give you a pharmacy type response. You know, the benefits typically accrue over repeated use. But outside of the grounding and the eye chill skills, most of these other things can be performed on a regular basis.
I found, at least in my experience, and you probably remember in my surgeries, that I found some of these really helpful when you're trying to explain to a provider what's going on and they're not listening and you're getting frustrated. I found these easier to use than to cry, maybe. Does anyone else also have a question? I saw Gary, I think, come off mute.
Do you have any experience with spoon theory? And if so, do you have any tips for managing your spoons?
Oh, we love spoon theory in the TGCT world. So maybe you can give a rundown of what that is first and then also comment on it.
I may have to defer to you, although
Oh.
I think what you're referring to is simply, well, I may be mistaken.
Each
My
day you
thought is
start
that
out with a number of spoons and each activity requires a spoon. Yes, it probably has many names.
Yeah, I mean, essentially conserving energy for the things that you consider priorities is my very quick summary, but I said you may have to help me out here.
No, that's Gary. Gary's our spoon guy, but we talk about it a lot in the groups that yeah, you start out maybe with 10 spoons or 12 spoons and you're trying to determine, like, is this worth one of my spoons, and how do you set limits once you're out of spoons? So maybe you can give some guidance on how to set limits once you're out of spoons. Is that what you mean, Gary?
Yeah, just looking for any tips on how to conserve. I guess if we get rid of the spoon theory part, since we don't, we're not up on that, just some tips on how to better manage a limited energy supply for those with chronic illness throughout the day, when it takes extra energy sometimes just to do basic things.
Yeah. Well, again, I think obviously when you have a limited amount of energy, hopefully you're clear on your priorities in terms of, desired activity as well as committed responsibilities. I'm not, and perform activities according to order of priority.
And
I
listing
know
even
that's
small things, right? Like listing getting out of bed as an achievement. I think some days that truly is an achievement.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, noting what you are doing and celebrating every short term goal and longer term goals. Absolutely.
And setting boundaries for those that don't understand that you have spoons.
Yes. Yes. As I think, Gary, I think it was your slide that so beautifully illustrated that, there's so many symptoms that people can't see, as well as symptoms that they may see. And being honest about and acknowledging your limitations so that you can feel more at ease to honor those limitations as is necessary or desired comes to mind as well.
Also, we got a question if palliative care has some of these solutions, or if they're like, is this integrated into a holistic model for treatment, or is this something purely you can get through therapy?
So the techniques that I shared are practices that you'll commonly learn through counseling. Palliative care is its own, it's a specialty area that focuses on symptom management. And palliative care, as I've participated in it as a social worker with the hospice and palliative care program, is mostly medical in its focus on symptom management. But if social work or counseling is a piece of the palliative care model that is in your area, then that person may work with you on these other practices. But again, the practices that I've outlined tonight are primarily shared through counseling.
Well, thank you. I will open up to any other questions, and thank you everyone we went over, but we realize how important it is to have these topics and have these discussions. So we're grateful you guys have stayed along. Also, there's a question about what do you recommend to deal with people who don't take your condition seriously because they can't physically see it?
I think if there are people that truly matter to you, then I think asking if they're open to education and to your sharing of your experience and how it is a place to start.
I think you said something that resonated with me before, is like cut relationships that don't serve you.
Yeah, I mean, there at some point, it may be that people are not willing or able to respond in a way that feels empathic and truly understanding. And if that's the case, that relationship may no longer benefit you. And it sounds harsh, but sometimes we end relationships that are not serving us or are harmful for us.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you everyone also for participating in your time. Any last questions before we close out for the evening for everyone? Well, we're getting a little bit of thank yous. So I think that means that we are done. So thank you very much for your time. For many of you, you'll see the newsletter for TGCT and GCT. And if you're in GIST, you will also get a newsletter for upcoming events as well. So stay tuned for more webinars, more information at all times. And this will be posted on our YouTube as well as social media. So you can find it later if you want to watch again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.